improvement. This can always be improved upon, subject to funds availability. It may be necessary to review the sponsorship of academics abroad. First, tech funds should enhance monitoring to ensure that academics are permitted to study only in credible institutions abroad. Additionally, B, sponsoring academics abroad just for the sake of it. This should be prioritized such that critical areas of need do not have adequate expertise or facilities are targeted. Areas that may also enhance the country's technological and medical advancement abroad for postgraduate studies should be anchored on an overall national strategy of manpower training in critical areas, promoting technological advancement, productivity, and national security. This will require effective training and coordination. Relevant courses in this regard should be accorded priority. In addition, for all university academics for all university academics on doctoral programs who are not beneficiaries of TEDFund programs, TEDFund can consider the possibility of guaranteeing sponsorship of 1 month to 3 months scholar in residence program in credible universities abroad to enable them access further academic resources in aid of their doctoral programs in Nigeria. This will ensure that academics on doctoral programs in Nigeria benefit from such external components of training and exposure. Problems or advanced national transformation should be supported. TEDFund should consider expanding the coverage to other universities, some other universities, by expanding the university coverage on a yearly basis. This will ensure that potential viable projects of academics in presently non-beneficiary institutions are not lost. Different areas of the country, progress will be far from us. In Nigeria, this includes both the research support and doctoral training components. Even if private universities are seen as private in the practice of the kind, the academics in those institutions are not the private properties of the university proprietors. Their doctoral training and research findings will be to the benefit of the country and scholarship. If sustained and expanded, the new tech and also enhance the quest for innovation and technological development. And indeed, in the entire educational sector, while efforts are geared towards progress in this regard, it is also important to address some of the other disturbing issues in the university system in the country. Currently, the media is awash with reports of crisis in the selection of country that it is increasingly becoming very difficult to select vice chancellors in public universities in a non-rancorous, non-chaotic, and sane manner. I have had cause to remark some years ago that given the nature of the struggle for the position of vice chancellor in the country's public universities, the country may be heading to a situation where physical assassination becomes part of the tools in the desperate pursuit of the office. The ultra-desperation of some of the vice chancellorship aspirants and their sponsors and supporters and sympathizers is making nonsense of the hard-fought university autonomy by the academic staff union of universities. This arises as the intrigues and crises orchestrated by some of these actors have empowered outside the governing councils and universities, notably the Ministry of Education, the Presidency, and even the National University on this selection process. It must be added though that in the main, these governmental bodies are compelled by the circumstances to intervene. Perhaps it is time to reappraise the whole process of vice chancellorship selection in Nigeria's public universities. Even then, for quite some time, unthinkable universities are in other words, a candidate must be an Igbo from the southeast and a Yoruba from the southwest, respectively. This is also the case in other parts of the country. The situation is worse in the northern part of Nigeria. Even the University of Benin, like a few others, used to be a model, but I think recently it has also yielded or succumbed to this temptation. But the overall point here is that it is unhelpful allowing universities to descend into the abyss of communalization of university administration, by which I mean a situation where the immediate host community or ethnic group seizes and monopolizes or substantially monopolizes the control of university administration to its advantage. These are symptomatic of bad leadership. These are disturbing trends, especially when viewed against international best practice and the negative consequences. Given the situation in Nigerian universities, it is hazardous for persons from excluded zones to be perceived, rightly or wrongly, to be interested in the office of the Vice Chancellor in a federal university. When actions or comments of such persons are construed or misconstrued to indicate interest in the office or even in less ranking offices in some cases, then such persons become the target of conspiratorial attack built around ethnic sentiments. The problem of localization of university is pervasive. Some administrations deliberately recruit academic staff from the immediate locality or catchment area. The staff composition of some state universities is more plural than that of some so-called federal universities. Universities abroad, including many universities in some African countries, draw considerable members of staff from outside their countries. This is helpful in such universities. This is helpful to such universities in relation to global ranking. The universality of the university should also reflect in the diverse nature. Even admission criteria into federal universities encourage localization of studentship. There are state-owned universities in Nigeria whose student population is much more diverse than that of federal universities. Given this trend in the area of staff recruitment and student admission, private universities in the country that maintain focus are likely to relatively excel, especially in the long run. It is time to review admission criteria for federal universities to promote merit. Merit itself promotes diversity. Under the current regime of admission criteria, merit is 45%, catchment area 35%, and educationally less developed states 20%. The admission criteria ought to be reorganized to ensure that it is driven by merit. Today, there is at least one federal university in each state of the country and the FCT. And of course, virtually all the states in the country also have their own state-owned universities. Of course, what all of this means is expansion of access to university placement by applicants. across the country. The current regime of criteria also gives the impression that federal universities are essentially for Nigerians, whereas universities ensure that the best candidates receive admission. 10% can be reserved for disadvantaged groups, which includes gender, poorly represented zones, and the physically challenged. This proposal has the advantage of promoting excellence without neglecting the need for special consideration. Of course, the other 10% can be left at the discretion of each university. All of this is also important because education itself is intricately related to developing the society. When we're talking about technological breakthrough innovation, you can't do this, outside a functional educational system. Another major issue in governance in the country is adherence to rule of law and democratic principles. Of course, we recall that the current president emerged, in a situation where you had a tense election, and the incumbent president at the time congratulated him even while results were still being collated. The idea, therefore, was that the current government will also do all that is necessary to oppose democratic tenets and rule of law. That was expected. Whatever the shortcomings of the administration of President Umaru Yar'Adua and President Jonathan, they no doubt set a high benchmark with respect to adherence to rule of law and democratic principles generally. They did not adopt a do-or-die mentality to election, and they exercised considerable restraint from appraisiveness. Of course, here I catalog some of the cases of disobedience, court orders and all that. We remember Colin Dasuki retired and some others who were victims of that. Court sharing through Gestapo site invasion of the houses of some justices, including some justices of the Supreme Court, on suspicion of corruption remains a sore point for the administration. The controversial removal from office of the Chief Justice of Nigeria was announced by the President in clear violation of the provisions of the country's constitution. The removal was even more disturbing as it happened close to the 2019 general election. Not a few people believe that the legal removal of the CGN was linked to the general election, where it was certain that the CGN, who was perceived as non-compliant, was to play a prominent role in the adjudication of conflict that would arise from the election in which the incumbent president was a candidate. The issue of the CGN ought to be handled with utmost caution in deference to the principle of separation of power inherent in the presidential system of government adopted by Nigeria. Caution is even more germane in this case, given that the CGN is the head of the judiciary and arm of government. That the power of removal of the CGN from office is not placed in the hands of the president. Instead, the power to remove the CGN is constitutionally vested in the Senate, which requires supermajority, is two-thirds majority of the membership of Senate to achieve successfully. The difficult process of removing the CGN is a deliberate constitutional safeguard to protect the independence and integrity of the judiciary, as well as promote checks and balances in the system. Because when we talk about leadership, it reflects a lot of this. and once things are not done properly in this regard, you create things that in this country. Of course, we also remember the intimidation and frozen again, and that's a government who had immunity, bestowed on him by the Constitution. These are forgiven. In other words, we have not committed any offense again. They have been washed away by the waters of APC. Okay. One isolated case or two outside general election have been subject to questions really, with allegations of manipulations and so on. Of course, politicians will always tag election rigged, unfair when they lose. But the reality is that there were problems, there were issues with the 2019 general elections. There was also general misuse of the security, actually, to either suppress votes, especially some parts of the country, south, genocide, not, that improvements will henceforth be brought to bear, in the electoral process in this country. Electoral integrity leaders who are unable to perform in office in free, fair, and the credible electoral system guarantees that voters are effectively positioned to vote out non-performing leaders from office and replace them with other persons who could suffer similar fate of removal from office if they fail to perform to the satisfaction of the majority of the electorate. A perverse electoral system, however, robs voters of the ability to actually determine who governs, as their votes in the election to be effective and meaningless. This explains why electoral integrity, not mere conduct of elections, is crucial. It's quite interesting to read the statement by President Buhari that the federal government will do all it takes to prevent the reoccurrence of the NSAS protests or similar protests.